My name is Madison. I'm 32 years old. And for my entire life, I've been trying to buy a ticket to a place I should have been able to call home. When my cousin Ashley got accepted to her dream art residency in Berlin, I happily spent $17,200 to make it happen. I paid for her flight, her apartment deposit, her supplies, everything. Then, the morning of her farewell party, a party I was helping to plan, I received a text from my aunt that stopped my heart. We've decided to keep tonight to just close family. It would be best if you didn't attend as a guest. I hope you understand. A guest. I stared at the word on my phone, the letters blurring through my tears. If I wasn't family after everything I'd done, after my entire life with them, then what was I? To understand why that single word could detonate 28 years of my life. You need to know about my family. My parents died in a car crash when I was 4. My mother's sister, Kimberly, and her husband, Michael, took me in. They already had a daughter, Ashley, who was the same age. From the very beginning, the dynamic was set in stone. Ashley was the golden child, their real daughter. I was the obligation, the sad story, the guest who never left. Growing up, the differences were a constant humming background noise. Ashley's finger paintings were framed and hung in the living room. My perfect report cards were glanced at and placed in a drawer. Her birthday parties were extravagant. Themed events with pony rides and magicians. Mine were marked with a quiet dinner and a store-bought cake. It was as if celebrating my existence was a chore. The family photos that lined the hallway told the story better than I ever could. There were dozens of Ashley at every age. Family portraits of the 3 of them, beaming. Pictures that included me were rare, usually from big holiday gatherings, where my absence would have been too obvious to ignore. I remember once asking Aunt Kimberly why there were so few photos of me. She just patted my head and said, "Oh, you were always so camera shy, sweetie." But I remember standing perfectly still, smiling, waiting to be included. Family vacations were planned around Ashley's interests, often without even telling me until the bags were being packed. The excuse was always the same. "Oh, we just assumed you'd be busy with your studies." I learned early on to be self-sufficient. I had to. Because while they were building a family of 3, I was building a life for one, and I became very, very good at it. The final chapter of my heartbreak began 3 months ago. At a Sunday dinner. It was one of those rare, peaceful evenings. Uncle Michael had grilled steaks, and my cousin Ashley, the aspiring artist, had brought a bottle of expensive wine. I brought a homemade chocolate torte that only my uncle complimented. As we finished the meal, Ashley cleared her throat dramatically, her eyes sparkling. "I have news," she announced. "I got accepted to the Berlin art residency. I'll be studying with some of the best painters in Europe for a whole year." The table erupted. My aunt and uncle were hugging her, already planning their first visit. I was genuinely happy for her. Despite our complicated history, I admired her talent. "That's amazing." "Ash," I said. "When do you leave?" "In 3 months," she said, her smile faltering slightly. "But there's a small problem." The joy in the room deflated. "The residency doesn't come with any funding," she explained, her voice dropping. "I have to cover my travel, the housing deposit, and all my living costs until I can find part-time work." My aunt and uncle exchanged a worried glance. They were comfortable, but they didn't have that kind of cash just sitting around. Ashley mentioned a figure, a starting point, that made my uncle wince. $10,000. In that moment, watching her dream hang in the balance, something inside me broke. Maybe it was the wine, or maybe it was that deep desperate, lifelong need to finally, definitively, prove my worth. I heard myself say, "I can help." Every head at the table turned to me. "I can cover it," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I've been saving for a down payment on a bigger place. But this is more important." The shock on their faces was almost comical. Ashley was the first to move. She flew out of her chair and wrapped me in a tight hug. "Oh my God. Madison, are you serious? I promise I will pay you back every single cent." It was a promise I'd heard 1,000 times before. But with her arms around me, and my aunt and uncle looking at me with something resembling awe, I let myself believe it. That initial $10,000 was just the beginning. It was like a dam had broken. First, it was the apartment. The one she could afford was uninspiring, so I paid an extra $2,000 for a place with better natural light. Then she needed professional-grade art supplies that were supposedly cheaper here, which added another $1,500. Then came the new laptop, with a special graphics card for her digital work. That was $1,700. The final straw was the $2,000 for specialized climate-controlled shipping for her large canvases. Each request was a new test of my loyalty. And each time I said yes, I felt a little closer to belonging. By the time it was all done, I had spent $17,200. I was the architect of her dream. And for the first time, I felt like a real part of the family. My phone felt cold in my hand. It would be best if you didn't attend as a guest. The words just hung there. Brutal and final. My first call wasn't to them. It was to my best friend, Morgan. I choked out the story between sobs, the humiliation burning in my throat. They did what Morgan's voice was pure ice. After you dropped over $17,000 on her, after you planned half the party, they're calling you at times, guest times. That's what she said. I whispered, wiping my eyes. Morgan, I feel like such an idiot. You're not an idiot. Madison, you're a kind, generous person who has been systematically exploited by emotional vampires. This isn't just not okay. This is cruel. Her anger was a shield, protecting the part of me that just wanted to curl up and disappear. What do? I asked, feeling completely helpless. You don't do anything, she said firmly. You don't beg for a seat at their table. And you sure as hell don't let them get away with this. Before I could even process her words, my phone buzzed with an incoming call. Aunt Kimberly. My stomach twisted. I almost didn't answer. But some small, wounded part of me needed to hear her try to justify it. Hello, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Madison, she began, her tone already laced with irritation. I hope you're not going to make a scene about this. A scene, I repeated, my voice cracking. You just uninvited me to a party for your daughter, whose entire move abroad I paid for. Because I'm not real family. Don't be so dramatic, she snapped. It's about intimacy. Ashley wants to spend her last night with the people who have been there since the very beginning. It's not personal. Not personal. Every choice they had ever made regarding me was personal. Every forgotten birthday. Every overlooked achievement. It was all personal. As she kept talking, explaining how my presence would make things uncomfortable because they'd have to worry about including me in their memories. A strange clarity cut through my pain. I suddenly saw myself not as a wounded daughter, but as a bad investment. As a financial analyst, I advise people every day on their portfolios. I know all about the sunk cost fallacy. It's the irrational belief that you should continue to invest in something that's consistently losing value simply because you've already invested so much. You keep throwing good money after bad, hoping to turn a loss into a win. And in that moment, I realized my entire life had been a sunk cost fallacy. I had poured my love, my time, and a staggering amount of my money into an emotional black hole. And the returns were non-existent. The grief didn't vanish, but it crystallized. It turned from a messy, heartbreaking flood into a single, sharp point of resolve. Aunt Kimberly was still talking, but I wasn't listening anymore. I was calculating. When the call with my aunt ended, I didn't cry. The time for tears was over. The hurt was still there. A cold, heavy stone in my chest. But it was now surrounded by an unfamiliar calm. The calm of a decision made. I was a financial analyst. My job was to assess assets and liabilities, to cut losses, and to reallocate resources to more profitable ventures. It was time to apply my professional skills to my personal life. I sat down at my desk, opened my laptop, and began to dismantle the dream I had paid for. My hands were steady. My breathing was even. This wasn't revenge. This was a market correction. First, I called the airline. I navigated the automated menus with practiced efficiency. Yes. I'd like to cancel a flight reservation. I told the agent. I gave her Ashley's booking number. There will be a $400 cancellation fee. She informed me. That's perfectly acceptable. I replied. Please refund the remaining balance to the original credit card. One email confirmation later. Ashley's first-class ticket to Berlin ceased to exist. Next. The apartment. This was trickier. It was morning, in Germany. I found the number for the property management company and made the international call. I explained, in polite but firm terms, that as the financial guarantor and co-signer on the lease, I was officially withdrawing my support. May I ask the reason for the cancellation? The agent asked. His German accent crisp. Personal financial circumstances have changed. I said, the lie tasting like truth. I am no longer in a position to be legally responsible for this lease. He informed me that without a guarantor, the lease agreement would be void, unless Ashley could qualify on her own or find a new backer immediately. I told him I understood completely. The Berlin apartment, with its perfect natural light, evaporated into thin air. Finally, the bank. I logged into my online portal and went to the section for scheduled international wire transfers. I had set up a series of payments to cover Ashley's first 3 months of rent and utilities. I clicked through them one by one. Cancel. 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 The future funding for her European adventure vanished. With each click, with each call, I felt a piece of my own power returning. I wasn't the forgotten niece or the convenient ATM anymore. I was Madison, a 32-year-old woman with a good job, a home I owned, and the right to decide where my resources, both financial and emotional, were spent. I had closed out the worst investment of my life, and for the first time, my personal balance sheet felt like it was finally back in the black. The morning after, my phone began to buzz. I had blocked Aunt Kimberly and Ashley. But that didn't stop the rest of the family. The messages came in a flood. A storm of guilt and confusion from aunts and cousins I hadn't spoken to in months. What did you do to poor Ashley? She is absolutely devastated. Madison, that was a really cruel thing to do. She's your cousin. Family is supposed to support each other. Your grandmother is so disappointed. Each message was a tiny paper cut, but the core wound from my aunt's text had cauterized me. Their words couldn't hurt me anymore. I ignored them all. I made coffee, sat on my balcony, and for the first time in as long as I could remember, I felt a sense of peace. That peace was shattered around noon by a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. It was my Uncle Michael. I braced myself for a wave of anger, for accusations and demands. I let it ring 4 times before my curiosity won. I answered. Madison, he said. His voice wasn't loud or angry. It was quiet, heavy, with a weariness that felt ancient. We need to talk. There's nothing to talk about, I said. My voice flat. I made some financial decisions. That's all. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could hear him take a deep, ragged breath. I'm sorry, he whispered. And the words were so unexpected, they knocked the air out of my lungs. I'm so sorry. Sorry for what I asked. Confused. For the party. For Kimberly. For all of it. He said, his voice cracking. For everything. For your entire life. Maddie? It continued, the story tumbling out of him in a torrent of guilt. Kimberly, she's always been jealous. Not of you. Exactly. Of what your parents left you. I froze. What are you talking about? My parents didn't have much. There was a small trust for my college education, and I used all of it. He sighed, a sound full of defeat. No? Madison. There was more. A lot more. It wasn't a fortune. But it was a comfortable nest egg. They wanted you to have a head start in life. I sank into a chair, my legs suddenly unable to hold me. What happened to it? I asked, already knowing the answer. We used it, he confessed, the shame thick in his voice. Over the years, for Ashley, her private art lessons, her summer camps in Europe, the down payment on her first car. Kimberly always justified it. She said it was just balancing things out, making it fair. I knew it was wrong, but I went along with it. It was easier than fighting her. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. The resentment. The constant othering. It wasn't just emotional. It was financial. They had been stealing from me my entire life. The $17,200 I had just given them. It wasn't me buying my way in. It was me, unknowingly replenishing the funds they had already taken. The betrayal was so profound. So absolute. It went beyond simple heartbreak. This was criminal. I'm going to pay it all back, Uncle Michael said. His voice thick, with a resolve I had never heard from him before. Every single cent. The trust fund. The $17,200 you just gave us. All of it. I'm cashing out some of my retirement funds. It was your money. Madison, you should have had it years ago. His words were a balm on a wound I never even knew I had. The money was secondary. What I had been starving for my entire life was this acknowledgement. Validation. Someone to finally look at the unfairness of it all and say, you were right. This was wrong. You deserved better. In that moment, he wasn't my passive uncle anymore. He was a mirror, reflecting back the truth of my experience. And in his apology, I finally felt seen. That conversation was the beginning of the end. And also, the beginning of something new. We talked for over an hour. He told me he was taking control of the family finances and that he and Kimberly were starting marriage counseling. He was done being a bystander in his own life. And in mine. The story jumps forward. 6 months now. The healing hasn't been linear. It's been messy and difficult. But it's been real. I'm in therapy. Learning to unpack decades of conditioning that taught me my worth was tied to my utility. I'm learning to build boundaries that are not walls, but fences with gates that I control. My relationship with Uncle Michael is slowly repairing. He makes a payment into my account on the 1st of every month. Without fail. More importantly, he calls me every Sunday. Just to talk. Not to ask for anything. But just to see how I am. We're getting to know each other. Not as a warden and a ward, but as two adults trying to build something honest from the wreckage. Ashley did make it to Berlin. My uncle gave her a small loan. Enough for a tiny apartment and a budget airline ticket. She works 2 jobs to support herself while attending her residency. Last month, I received a wire transfer from her for $200. The memo line just said, "Start." She calls sometimes. Our conversations are awkward. But she's trying. She's learning what it means to stand on her own. And for the first time, she seems to respect that I've been doing it all along. I haven't spoken to Aunt Kimberly. I'm not sure if I ever will. Some things are too broken to fix. But I've found peace in letting go. The anger is gone, replaced by a quiet sense of self-possession. My definition of family has changed. It's my friend Morgan, who brings me soup when I'm sick. It's my colleagues who celebrate my professional wins. It's the new community I'm building. One, based on mutual respect and genuine affection. I'm not a guest in my own life anymore. I'm the host. I'm building my own table. And it's filled with people who love me for who I am. Not for what I can provide. And that is a return on investment that's finally worth everything.